You need to prove to the world what you can do better than the other. So that means you need to fight yourself physically and mentally. You need to prove for yourself you can do something different.
Jet Li has always stayed quiet when people compare him to Bruce Lee. For years, fans have debated their skills, but Jet Li never fed into it. He kept his thoughts to himself, until now. For the first time, he's breaking his silence on Bruce Lee, and what he just revealed has left everyone stunned.
He put a lot of things together. He take all the bad things, put it together, become Bruce Lee style. His own style. That's what we call the Bruce Lee style. His own style.
His words are shocking, unexpected, and might just change the way people see Bruce Lee forever. Did he just admit something no one saw coming? In this video, we will reveal what Jet Li finally said about Bruce Lee. Shared martial arts foundation. Jet Li and Bruce Lee are two of the greatest martial artists to ever grace the big screen. While their styles were different, their dedication to martial arts was the same. Jet Li trained in wushu from a young age, competing at the highest levels and becoming a national champion in China. Bruce Lee, on the other hand, developed Jeet Kune, a martial art based on efficiency and adaptability. Both men spent their lives perfecting their craft, training endlessly to master their movements. Even though Jet Li has rarely spoken about Bruce Lee, it's impossible to ignore the similarities in their journeys. They were both more than just action stars. They were masters of their art, pushing themselves beyond limits to showcase martial arts in the most powerful way possible. There's more to find out. Stay tuned for more details. Bruce Lee completely changed martial arts cinema. Before him, martial arts scenes in movies were either slow or exaggerated. He brought speed, precision, and real combat techniques to the screen. His movements were explosive, and his presence was unmatched. He was proving that martial arts could be both beautiful and deadly. His 1971 film, The Big Boss, made him a superstar in Hong Kong, and then Fist of Fury in 1972 took his fame to another level, but it was Enter the Dragon in 1973 that made him a global phenomenon. Tragically, he died just before its release, but the impact of that film made sure his legacy would never be forgotten.
He was a terrific athlete. He was explosively fast.
He was the Einstein of martial art.
Bruce Lee, the world-renowned martial artist and filmmaker, passed away just before midnight.
When Jet Li started his film career in the 1980s, martial arts movies were already a massive industry, thanks to Bruce Lee's influence. But Jet Li's style was different. Unlike Bruce Lee, who had a street-fighting, raw power kind of energy, Jet Li's movements were precise, controlled, and elegant. This came from his years of competitive wushu training. His first major role in Shaolin Temple turned him into a star in China. The film was a massive success, and for many people, it was their first introduction to real Shaolin Kung Fu. While Bruce Lee's characters were usually lone fighters taking on corrupt figures, Jet Li often played historical heroes, warriors, and monks who represented discipline and honor. As Jet Li's career grew, he became one of the biggest martial arts stars in the world, following in Bruce Lee's footsteps, but in his own way. In the 1990s, his role in Once Upon a Time in China made him an icon, especially in Hong Kong cinema. He played Wong Fei Hung, a legendary Chinese folk hero, showcasing his incredible speed, flexibility, and mastery of traditional Chinese martial arts. His fights were fast and acrobatic, often featuring wire work that made them look almost superhuman. It was a different approach from Bruce Lee's grounded, brutal fighting style, but both men had the same goal, which was to bring martial arts to the world in the most exciting way possible. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Jet Li made his move to Hollywood, much like Bruce Lee had done in the early 70s. His first Hollywood role was as the villain in Lethal Weapon 4, where he played a deadly Chinese gangster who barely spoke but stole every scene he was in. His speed and precision shocked audiences who had never seen anything like it. This role opened the door for him to become a leading man in Hollywood, just as Enter the Dragon had done for Bruce Lee years earlier. Jet Li's Hollywood breakthrough came with Romeo Must Die, where he played the lead role alongside Aaliyah. It was one of the first times a Chinese martial artist was positioned as a mainstream Hollywood action hero. Bruce Lee had tried to do something similar with the Green Hornet in the 60s and later with Enter the Dragon, but his career was tragically cut short. Jet Li, however, got to continue what Bruce started, proving that martial artists from China could be more than just side characters or villains in Hollywood films. Both Jet Li and Bruce Lee became cultural symbols, representing Chinese martial arts and philosophy on a global scale. Bruce Lee wasn't just about fighting, he spoke about self-improvement, breaking barriers, and finding one's own path. Jet Li carried a similar message, especially later in his career when he focused on roles that highlighted discipline, morality, and the deeper meaning behind martial arts. His 2006 film Fearless was a tribute to the philosophy of martial arts, showing that true strength isn't just about fighting, but about self-control and wisdom, something Bruce Lee also deeply believed in. Jet Li has never been the type to make bold statements about his influences, but it's clear that Bruce Lee's impact is present in every part of modern martial arts cinema, including Jet Li's career. Whether it was breaking into Hollywood, introducing martial arts to new audiences, or inspiring millions to take up martial arts, Bruce Lee laid the foundation that Jet Li and so many others have built upon. You're on the edge of your seat, and it's about to get even better. Comparing Jet Li and Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee and Jet Li may both be martial arts legends, but their fighting styles couldn't be more different. Bruce Lee was all about efficiency, power, and speed. He didn't believe in wasting energy on unnecessary movements. Bruce Lee's punches and kicks were direct and explosive, designed to end a fight as quickly as possible. You can see it clearly in his movies. When he hits, it's like a bolt of lightning. His fight scenes were about showing raw strength and the reality of combat. His philosophy behind Jeet Kune was that a fighter should be adaptable, taking the best techniques from different martial arts instead of following rigid traditions. Jet Li, on the other hand, comes from a completely different background. He trained in wushu, which is a highly disciplined and artistic form of Chinese martial arts. Unlike Bruce Lee's street fighting approach, wushu is built on balance, agility, and grace. Jet Li's movements flow like water. His kicks, spins, and jumps are so smooth they almost look like dance moves. In his movies, his fighting feels almost effortless, as if he's gliding through combat. His style is about precision and control. This makes his action scenes feel more like a work of art rather than a brutal street fight. Their personalities were just as different as their fighting styles. Bruce Lee was loud and bold. He had no problem speaking his mind, whether it was about martial arts, philosophy, or breaking racial barriers in Hollywood. He was constantly talking about the deeper meaning of fighting, about how martial arts was not just about kicking and punching, but about personal growth. He would go on interviews and confidently explain why traditional martial arts needed to evolve, why fighters should be free from rigid forms. Jet Li, however, has always been much more reserved. He doesn't talk as much about his personal philosophy, and he doesn't try to challenge the martial arts world the way Bruce Lee did. Instead, he lets his work speak for itself. One major difference between them is their spiritual beliefs. Bruce Lee was deeply philosophical, but he wasn't tied to any particular religion. His philosophy was a mix of Taoism, Buddhism, and Western ideas. He believed in constant self-improvement and finding one's own path. Jet Li, however, is a devout Buddhist. His belief in Buddhism has shaped the way he sees martial arts and life in general. For him, martial arts isn't about dominating an opponent, but about self-discipline and balance. Later in his career, this became even more obvious in his film choices, where he often played characters who valued peace over violence. This is why a movie like Fearless was so important to him. It wasn't just an action film, it was a reflection of his beliefs. By the early 2000s, Jet Li was making a name for himself in Hollywood. He had already conquered Chinese cinema, and now he was stepping into a much bigger stage. His first major Hollywood film, Lethal Weapon 4, introduced him to Western audiences as a silent but deadly villain. Then came Romeo Must Die, where he played the lead alongside Aaliyah, proving he could be more than just the bad guy. Around the same time, he starred in The One, a sci-fi action film that let him experiment with different fighting styles, blending traditional martial arts with Hollywood-style visual effects. During this time, Bruce Lee had already been gone for almost 30 years, but his legacy was stronger than ever. Martial arts movies were everywhere, and Hollywood was embracing them more than ever before. The late 90s and early 2000s saw a wave of martial arts films hitting mainstream audiences. Movies like The Matrix borrowed heavily from Bruce Lee's philosophy, and Jackie Chan was bringing his own comedic style to Hollywood action films. Jet Li was stepping into an industry that had already been influenced by Bruce Lee, proving once again how much Bruce had shaped the future of martial arts cinema. Don't miss the next scene where things get even more interesting. Jet Li speaks about Bruce Lee. Jet Li has never been one to boast about his own achievements, but when he finally spoke about Bruce Lee, there was no hiding the admiration in his words. He made it clear that Bruce wasn't just another martial artist. He was a force that reshaped everything. Jet acknowledged that without Bruce, things would have been much harder for him. Bruce opened doors that others, including himself, could only dream of walking through. The idea of a Chinese martial artist leading a Hollywood film? That was unthinkable before Bruce came along. By the time Jet arrived in Hollywood, the industry had already been prepared to accept an Asian action star, and that was entirely because Bruce had fought those battles decades earlier. It wasn't just about opening doors, though. Jet couldn't ignore the raw physicality Bruce brought to the screen. He described Bruce's speed and power as revolutionary, unlike anything people had ever seen before. Directors had to slow down his punches just so the audience could actually catch what was happening. Stuntmen braced themselves before taking his kicks because they weren't just for show. Bruce actually hit hard. Jet, despite being incredibly fast and precise himself, never tried to compare. Jet Li also praised Bruce Lee's physical abilities, calling him a force of nature. Bruce Lee's movements were unlike anything the world had ever seen. His punches were so fast that directors had to slow down the footage just so audiences could see them properly. His kicks were so powerful that they sent stuntmen flying across the set. Jet Li, despite being a master in his own right, has always acknowledged that Bruce Lee's explosiveness was on another level. Before Bruce, martial arts were either treated as a mystical, ancient tradition or dismissed as something niche that belonged in kung fu schools. Bruce turned it into something universal. He made people respect it not just as a form of fighting, but as a mindset, a way of life. That impact went far beyond just movies because it influenced generations. Jet understood this deeply because, in his own way, he had the same mission. They both wanted to show the world the beauty of Chinese martial arts. Of course, their approaches couldn't have been more different. While Bruce's style was direct and efficient, Jet always focused on the fluidity and artistry of wushu. He never tried to imitate Bruce because their martial arts philosophies weren't the same. Bruce was about breaking down traditions and finding the fastest, most effective way to win a fight. Do you think Jet Li's words about Bruce Lee are true? Lee's one-inch punch. Bruce Lee's one-inch punch is the most well-known move in martial arts history. As its name suggests, the one-inch punch is a technique martial artists use to hit targets at incredibly close range. The thought that, if done right, an attacker can exert enough force to bring down his opponent makes it unique. Bruce Lee's one-inch punch gained widespread recognition as early as the 1960s, about 10 years before Lee rose to prominence as a global martial arts celebrity. Lee became famous when he demonstrated it at the Beach Karate National Championship. At the time, the martial arts community took notice of him widely. Interest in Lee's one-inch punch increased dramatically as his notoriety increased. Although Lee made the move so famous that many renowned martial artists from different kung fu forms now utilize it, Lee remains the most well-known practitioner of the technique. Keep watching. The story is just getting interesting. Lee did not come up with the one-inch punch suddenly in 1964. It is based on Chinese martial arts in general and the instruction he received as a teenager. Lee's martial arts expertise began in the 1950s when he trained under Wing Chun Grandmaster Wing Chun, who laid the groundwork for Lee's form of Kung Fu, Jeet Kune Do. The one-inch punch's tenets derive from its theory, since Wing Chun is a fighting style for close quarters. Lee was already acquainted with techniques designed for close quarters combat because of his training in Wing Chun. Before the one-inch punch was publicly unveiled, Bruce Lee's pupil, James DeMille, provided insight into Lee's development method. He claimed that Lee developed an enhanced version of an already known Wing Chun move. Lee attempted to shorten the technique by experimenting with various stances and angles, since he thought it would be more effective if performed from a closer range. Eventually, they found a combination that worked. Lee demonstrated its power once by throwing someone 16 feet back and landing them squarely in a chair. Lee's accuracy, instant execution, speed, a crucial attribute for which the actor is currently well known, and the precise angle at which he accomplished it are all responsible for his accomplishments. Bruce Lee's one-inch punch is mighty because of his speed, which is also one of the reasons so few martial artists have been able to replicate it so well. Lee's father taught him the foundations of martial arts. During his teenage years, Lee got entangled in gang disputes in Hong Kong, which resulted in a lot of street battles. Lee's studies of Wing Chun had the most significant impact on his development as a martial artist. After suffering defeats at the hands of rival gang members, 16-year-old Lee trained in Wing Chun under Ip Man in late 1956 and early 1957. Form practice, sticking hand drills, wooden dummy techniques, and free sparring were the main components of Ip's regular lessons. The classes followed no predetermined schedule. Between 1956 and 1958, Edward, the coach of the St. Francis Xavier's college boxing team, trained Lee in boxing. In 1958, Lee defeated Gary Elms, the defending champion, via knockout in the Hong Kong Schools Boxing Championship final. Following his relocation to the U.S., Lee was significantly impacted by heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali, whose moves he observed and adopted into his style during the 1960s. Lee advocated mixed martial arts training and was especially interested in grappling. In addition to Jean LaBelle, Lee received instruction from several judo practitioners in Seattle and California, including Fred Sato, Jesse Glover, Taki Kimura, Hayward Nishioka, and Wally J. He studied as much as he taught, and many of his early pupils were skilled in judo and other martial arts. On the set of The Green Hornet, Lee became friends with LaBelle and offered to teach him striking arts in exchange for learning grappling tactics. Lee's grappling tactics. Prominent grapplers Lou Thez and Ed Lewis had taught LaBelle to catch wrestling, and vital judo and catch wrestling techniques can be found in Lee's Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Ji Hanjai, the Hapkido instructor, also taught him some grappling techniques. Glover claims that Lee's main observation about judo's ineffectiveness was when it came to seizing the opponent. During their first training session, Glover demonstrated an Osoto Gari for Lee, which Lee thought was a good technique, but he didn't appreciate that Glover had to cling to Lee. Lee learned how to avoid being tackled or taken to the ground by opponents while living in Seattle. Glover said that Lee would not go to the ground if he could get you standing up. Still, Lee told LaBelle that he wished to incorporate judo into his fighting technique. He added judo throws, arm locks, and chokeholds to Jeet Kune Do, including the Osoto Gari. Lee showcased grappling moves in his films, including Way of the Dragon, where his character finishes his opponent Chuck Norris with a neck hold inspired by LaBelle. Lee felt grappling was not very useful in action choreography because it was not visually distinctive. In addition, Lee and Han Jae trade grappling techniques in Game of Death, and Lee uses wrestling to subdue Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's character. The training regimen of the Great Gama, an Indian-Pakistani Pelwani wrestling champion renowned for his strength in the grappling hold, also impacted Lee. Lee used Gama's workouts as part of his regimen, but that's not all. The Dragon Flag Bruce Lee was an extreme sportsman. According to his widow, Linda Lee, he would watch TV athletes perform full splits and never miss an opportunity to work out. Bruce's wife claimed that he would practice and hone his talents virtually every minute of the day. He knew he would need to put in a tremendous deal of practice and exercise to be the best martial artist in the world. Building up his core was Lee's top priority out of all the muscles in his body, since he felt that the stomach region, or core, is involved in practically every movement and is crucial in martial arts. Lee created what is now known as the Dragon Flag in his honor to strengthen his core. It is regarded as one of the most challenging core workouts available if you can't figure it out. Since Lee didn't play around, though Lee is said to have been able to sustain his entire body on the edge of a bench with only his shoulders touching anything, while the rest of his body remained perfectly rigid and horizontal to the ground, Stallone may have popularized the move in Rocky IV. These days, martial artists worldwide use Bruce's Dragon Flag exercises as a standard because of his ability to make martial artists understand the value of having strong core muscles. Stay tuned. The best part of the video is just around the corner. Lee's superhuman strength. Bruce Lee's sheer power is one of his accomplishments that many people fail to recognize. Although it may seem apparent that a martial artist must possess strength, most people are unaware of Bruce Lee's actual level of strength. Most people think that having very massive muscles equates to strength. Most likely, when you imagine someone who is powerful, you envision someone roughly 6 feet tall with more muscles than they could need. But Bruce Lee was a tiny man, but he possessed strength beyond the reach of most people's imaginations. Examining his training bags is a simple method to demonstrate this. Bruce practiced punching and kicking with training bags like other people do, but he would devour these packages in an instant. He would frequently pound through or rupture standard punching bags to the point where it became inconvenient for him to use them. Bruce would therefore have to locate denser, heavier sacks that would not break under the impact of his extraordinary power. Remember that a typical punching bag weighs roughly 50 kilograms. However, Bruce frequently had to utilize bags weighing more than 135 kilograms. According to reports, Bruce was able to kick these bags many feet into the air, which just served to highlight how amazing things are. Bruce could send these sacks moving, but if you tried to kick one yourself, they probably wouldn't move more than an inch or two when you made contact. Bruce Lee understood the human body like a pro. Not only could he perform an astonishingly high quantity of push-ups, but he could complete them with just one hand. He was once put through a test to determine how many push-ups he could complete. Bruce boldly decided to go further and challenged himself to perform push-ups with just 2 fingers. He accomplished more than 200 push-ups in this try. Later, he set a higher standard and accomplished at least 100 push-ups using his thumb. If that weren't enough, he frequently performed hundreds of pull-ups with just one hand. But there's still another awe-inspiring accomplishment. Bruce Lee could perform more than 1,500 consecutive push-ups without pausing if you were to judge him only on his standard form. Although that is utterly unbelievable, that is the reality. There was no man like this. That's not all. Bruce Lee enthusiasts have long known this, but those unfamiliar with martial arts might not. Bruce Lee was acclaimed as one of the world's best martial arts actors when he shot to fame in the 1960s and 1970s. But he came dangerously close to failing in the film industry. You might wonder why, since he was just too quick. Filmmakers could not capture Bruce Lee's movements in real time when they worked on The Green Hornet, one of his most well-known TV series. We now own cameras capable of recording at 30, 60, 120, or even 240 frames per second. However, most cameras in the 1960s and 70s had trouble recording film at a speed of only 24 frames per second. As a result, most of Bruce Lee's fight scenes appeared incorrectly in the film. As the filmmakers soon discovered, Bruce could throw 9 punches in a second. In addition, he had a 6-second kickoff speed. Bruce appeared motionless in numerous combat scenes because capturing his movements on a camera that could only capture 24 frames per second at most was difficult. Producers on the set then claimed that the footage they captured showed Bruce standing still as his foes descended around him. In actuality, though, his talent was too outstanding for the movies to match. The filmmakers had to ask Bruce to slow down so they could follow him properly, which helped to correct the dilemma. But even after that, his movements appear quite hazy on camera. If you enjoy watching martial arts movies, you've watched Karate Kid before. When you watch the movie again, you probably remember a scene where Daniel LaRusso practices using chopsticks to capture flies. What looks easy on the surface turns out to be quite challenging. Bruce Lee, though, would go one further. Regretfully, there was never a flawless photo of this accomplishment. However, according to reports, Bruce Lee would throw pieces of rice into the air and use chopsticks to catch them. He took this action to sharpen his reflexes in the most remarkable manner imaginable. He was reportedly very expert at it, seeing the rice practically every time it was thrown into the air. His reflexes were significantly quicker than any of his rivals at the moment. And after all these years, nobody has been able to equal or exceed his achievements. It seems so complex that many people today question whether Bruce Lee was able to accomplish this accomplishment at all. However, this is simply one more instance of Bruce Lee's superhuman abilities. Jeet Kune. Bruce Lee is the creator and practitioner of Jeet Kune Do, also known as JKD. It is a hybrid martial art that translates to Way of the Intercepting Fist in Chinese. It developed as a new school of martial arts philosophy from Lee's experiences in unarmed combat and self-defense and eclectic Zen Buddhist and Taoist beliefs. As an eclectic martial art, it relies on a fighting style heavily influenced by Wing Chun, Tai Chi, Taekwondo, boxing, fencing, and Jiu-Jitsu. Bruce Lee himself never formalized Jeet Kune Do before his death, forcing later JKD practitioners to rely upon their interpretation of the philosophy created by Bruce Lee. The central idea of Jeet Kune Do is the interception of the opponent and making corresponding responses or counterattacks that strike at incoming attacks. JKD also incorporates principles to help practitioners make instant decisions and improve the physical and mental self. The story just got much more enjoyable. 4 universal combat truths that Lee believed were self-evident and, if followed, would lead to combat success were incorporated into Jeet Kune Do. He thought that the 4 combat ranges in particular were crucial to his development as a total martial artist. Additionally, mixed martial arts are mostly tied to this principle. The intercepting idea comes from the belief held by JKD practitioners that a potent offense is always the best defense. Lee thought an opponent had to approach a target to attack them. This presented a chance to intercept that assault or motion. Intercepting physical attacks is not the only application of the interception principle. According to Lee, many nonverbals and telegraphs, subtle motions that an opponent is blind to, can be read or intercepted and utilized to one's benefit. Forming the offensive aspect of JKD, the 5 ways of attack are attacking categories that assist practitioners of Jeet Kune Do organize their fighting repertoire. The defensive part of JKD consists of the ideas of stop strikes and stop kicks, and simultaneous parrying and punching, which were taken from European fencing and Wing Chun's principle of simultaneous striking and defending. Lee adapted these ideas for unarmed combat and incorporated them into the JKD framework. Additionally, these ideas support the other interception principle. Lee said martial arts systems ought to be as adaptable as feasible. He frequently utilized the analogy of water to explain why flexibility is a valued quality in martial arts. Water has limitless flexibility. It can be seen through, yet it may also sometimes make objects invisible. It can break apart, circumnavigate obstacles, reassemble on the opposite side, or smash through obstacles. It can flow by the tiniest pebble or slowly lap at the toughest boulders to dissolve them. These are the qualities Lee thought a martial system ought to possess. Because of this rigidity, JKD students reject conventional fighting tactics, training regimens, and Confucian pedagogy in traditional kung fu schools. JKD is an incredibly flexible, dynamic idea because it is constantly changing. Bruce Lee is credited with saying, "Take what is beneficial, throw away what is useless." It is encouraged by JKD students to study every possible kind of warfare. This is thought to increase one's understanding of other combat techniques, build up one's armory, and teach one how to counter such strategies. Lee, the magician. If you've ever watched a magician up close, you've undoubtedly seen this timeless trick of taking a coin from behind someone's ear. Most magicians master this fundamental trick at some time in their careers. Unbelievably, Bruce Lee used to execute an identical feat for his followers. Bruce Lee would offer you a coin and place it in your hand rather than hiding one behind your ear. He would want you to extend your hand as far apart as possible. Bruce then had you close your palm before he could take the coin from you, detecting even the slightest movement on his part. No one could ever stop this man from taking the coin out of someone's palm because of how fast he moved, but Bruce continued to refine the trick over time, making it even more impressive. Bruce would not only take the penny before the person could close their hand, but he would also replace it with a different one. Whenever you believed the situation was under control, he would open your palm and show you that a new coin had been inserted. Imagine, please, if this man had chosen to use his abilities for evil rather than good. He would have been an expert swindler. Fortunately, Bruce made a far more honorable life choice. Let us know what you think in the comments section. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Click on the next video displayed on your screen. You will enjoy it.